Hello Mark, good to see you.
Hi Helen.
Mark, we are recording this episode today on Thursday the 11th of July, and as we speak, world leaders are meeting in Washington for a NATO summit, where it's widely expected they'll talk about geopolitical risks such as a war in Ukraine, threats posed by China and other concerns of global security. Given the rising geopolitical tensions and the critical role of merchant navies in national security, how do you propose NATO members can effectively balance military investments with the necessary funding for merchant navy revitalisation?
Well, I mean, I don't think they are. So that's the first point I'd like to make about that particular point is that NATO's mission is compromised and frustrated by the lack of mercantile marine and maritime professionals. So, that's something we are very, very agitated about and concerned about. And given this momentous occasion, the 75th anniversary of NATO, and recognising how crucial that's been to sustain peace in Europe and in the North Atlantic, of course, we've been calling on NATO to reflect on that and to think about the necessity to support the growth of the mercantile marines in NATO countries. And we've signed and issued a statement supported by 11 Nautilus Federation affiliates in NATO countries calling for that there needs to be a coalition of NATO member governments to support national mercantile marines and national maritime professionals, because we're too over-reliant on flags of convenience. They're the dominant force in shipping, and the top three are Liberia, Panama and Marshall Islands. And I don't want to be too dismissive of them, and I respect their sovereign rights, but they're not much use to you in a war. Last time I checked, there is no Panamanian Navy, there is no Liberian Navy, and there is no Marshall Islands Navy. And it is a bit grotesque. When I think back to the day of the seafarer that we've just celebrated last month,
Yes.
Which we seem to be, the focus was personal safety. And,
That's right.
Seafarers have a role, obviously, to play in that.
Yep.
And I don't want to diminish that in any way, because that's really important. But right now, it seems like we're focusing on the wrong issue. We've got Houthi rebels. They've attacked 60 ships in the last 12 months. We've had seafarers killed. They're putting their lives at risk. And the ship owners call on the navies of the United States, the UK and other European nations to defend them. Meanwhile, they choose the flags of Liberia, Panama, Marshall Islands and other flags of convenience and expect everybody else to come rushing to their defence when there's a problem. And that's bizarre.
It's a disconnect.
There's a disconnect.
Yeah.
The industry's fragmented, and the ship owners don't seem to understand that when they make that choice to use a flag of convenience and to walk away from their home flags, if I may describe it like that, the flags of the beneficial owners or where the control lies. I mean, but let's recall that under international law, the flag state is obliged to ensure that there's a genuine link between the flag and the owner of the vessel so that they can exercise effective control over that vessel. And the flag state has a responsibility to protect that vessel and to protect, most importantly, the crew. So whilst the IMO is saying, what personal tips have you got for your safety? The backdrop is the flag states pay little or no attention to providing that fundamental obligation that they have to our people, maritime professionals. When I think about Nautilus International members, but I also think about the Nautilus Federation family, the ITF family of unions, the 1.8 million seafarers out there risking their lives, as they did during COVID. And I think right now, as we have these heightened tensions in the Middle East, war in Europe and Ukraine, we've got the rising threat of Russia and China and now North Korea. The world is very, very, very uncertain at the moment. And right now we need NATO, and we need NATO members to think about the mercantile, marine and maritime professionals dimension, because they cannot deliver their mission without us. and we need investment. It doesn't matter whether you think about the United States, everything's fine in the United States. It's not. They have the same recruitment and retention crisis in the States that we have globally, and we have particularly in the UK, and it needs to be addressed because it undermines our resilience and our security. Without maritime, there is no resilience and there is no security. COVID showed us that most recently. But now we have these tensions in the world, and all the generals and the admirals are saying it's going to get worse. They're even talking about, the news this morning, the possibility of another world war, a third world war. Imagine that. I mean, it's a horrific thought.
It's awful.
But it's right to talk about it, it's right to think about it and strategize and plan to avoid it. But you can't avoid it. You can't strategize and plan without the Mercantile Marine. So where are we? They need to talk to us. They need to demonstrably invest in the Mercantile Marine, national flagshipping, not rely on flags of convenience, and national maritime professionals. And that's the critical thing that's missing in this conversation right now as we celebrate, or as they celebrate in Washington, D.C., the 75th anniversary of NATO.
So, I mean, you've given a really powerful account there about how nations need to invest in their mercantile marine. How, in reality, can NATO kind of encourage or influence that type of investment decision?
Look, somebody needs to take the lead.
Yeah.
And that's what we're lacking. That's what we need, at least, leadership. And we need leadership in this space around the mercantile marine. How they can then encourage, well, look, you know, governments are their own, the masters of their own destiny. They can make the decisions necessary, the economical and the strategic decisions, or the strategic and economic decisions, because one, you need to know where you're going, where you need to be, and then everything else will follow suit. But you need that determination, you need that leadership. So that's why we were calling for a coalition of governments within NATO to take that step forward. Look, it's not just us that's saying this. You know, the admirals and the generals, they make very clear what they need and what the risks are. We also know the academics, increasingly, there's a lot of academic thought going into this in the States and here about the importance of the linkage between maritime and maritime naval power. I mean, how do you deploy those forward placed troops? How do you put the resources and the materials and the weapons in that forward deployment without the mercantile marine? You know, these are lessons learned centuries ago, and other countries, China has been mentioned in particular, they know and they understand what is needed in order to advance their particular take on the way of the world order. And they are copying what the UK did and what the USA has done in the past. And if we just sit by and let them to do it, yes, they're putting the money in the place where it needs to be. And that's what we need to be doing. Yes. We're behind the curve now. And if we want to make sure that there never is another world war, then we need to be in that space and we need to advance these strategies. And mercantile marine, as I keep saying, is absolutely fundamentally important and central to this. So it's about time, it's long overdue that is part of the conversation and part of the thinking going forward. Yeah.
Now, of course, we've had a recent general election here in the UK. We've now got a new Labour government. It has committed is probably too strong a word, but Prime Minister Keir Starmer has said he would like to get to a point where they're investing 2.5% of GDP into our defences. What kind of words, or have you had any commitments or conversations around their commitments to the merchant navy as well?
We've reached out to all relevant departments. We've written to Secretary of State for Transport Louise Haigh. We've written to John Healey at the Defence. In fact, yesterday we met with Luke Pollard, who's Defence Minister. He wanted to hear from the unions, myself and Mick Lynch with our colleagues behind us with us. We met him yesterday in a hastily arranged meeting to discuss the problems we have in the RFA, and that was a very positive meeting, and he's looking for a reset in the relationship, and he wants the solution found for that dispute so that we can then move on to a wider discussion around what the RFA needs, and link back to the points I've been making before about the central role of the Merchant Navy. Of course, RFA is civil, it's part of the Merchant Navy, and that is a cornerstone for the UK. So that's been a very positive discussion. But of course, we've been working with across all the parties, with all the politicians, as we have in the past and we will continue to do. We've got a Labour government where we've got established relationships, we've got commitments to deal with a whole raft of issues that we need to address. Part of that need to invest in the merchant navy, in our maritime professionals. So I'm very hopeful, and all the early signs are that this is going to be a very positive relationship with the new government and with the ministers that have been appointed by the Prime Minister. So I'm very hopeful about that. But you know me, I'm very optimistic and a very hopeful guy. So I always say, you know, be careful with me because I can get carried away. But in my positivity and my optimism. But I'm very, very optimistic that this is a reset, and we you know, we can drive forward on our agenda. You know, there's a lot to do. We've had government support for maritime, but whenever we put forward our package of measures, you know, the easy stuff is by definition easy to achieve. The more difficult things take more time, and we have not got those across. You know, to pick out two, for example, Helen. You know, we absolutely clear we need 100% funding for maritime training through SMART. That's still one of our key asks. We need to reform tonnage tax. We need to drive more determinedly flag growth and training and employment of seafarers. So that needs to be looked at. We need to reform the training provider sponsorship arrangements under the tonnage tax. We not only we, but the Maritime Skills Commission set up by a previous maritime minister had a review of seafarer cadet training. One of the key things we need is a national maritime training organisation with power to ensure that the cadet training experience is as we would wish it to be, the very best and in the national interest, not for profit. Not with corners being cut on cadet training and the treatment of the cadets. They need to be sustained through their training, through that 3.5 years, so that they have a very positive experience, the best experience they possibly come out. They come out the other end as the best maritime professionals they can be, and then with the opportunity to pursue their careers at sea and ashore when they're ready to do that. So that's really, really important that we move quickly with the new government to press those points. And we believe we have an open door. We believe we have established those relationships so that we can hit the ground running with the government.
Yeah, so some really positive early signs of engagement with the new government there, but still a lot for us to fight for on behalf of our members. So thank you very much and good to speak with you.
Thanks, Helen.